Hey guys, welcome to today's episode. We have Dr. Afrouz Demeri talking all about fasting for fertility and female hormones. So welcome to today's episode. So question number 1.
Talk a little bit about yourself personally, tell people a little bit about you, and then talk about your own personal intermittent fasting journey.
Okay, so I'm the creator of Trimester Zero, a program that I designed to help couples have healthy babies, mainly because I had an unhealthy baby at a young age. And so it got me thinking, what did I do wrong? What did I not know? Why are there so many unhealthy kids being born with autism, with cancer, with all kinds of things? In my practice, I started to see that as an issue. And so I always thought it was the women. So I specialize in women's health. I have a clinic called Aim for Women, where I'm a naturopathic doctor trained in conventional and holistic medicine. And I thought it all starts with the women. So the more women I saw, I realized, gosh, no, this goes back to childhood. And then when I went back from childhood, I realized, no, this is all about when they're in the womb, pregnancy. And so when you go back, I realized the root cause of all disease actually starts from the sperm and the egg and the epigenetics that occur way before pregnancy. So that preconception health is my passion, and that's what I focus on. Now, when it comes to fasting, I grew up in Iran, and in our religion, I grew up with my grandmother always having times of the year where we would do special different fasts. So we would have a dairy-free month, we would have a meat-free month, we would have what's known now as so trendy, this intermittent fasting, although back then we didn't even have a name for it. It's just what we did. So religiously, I think I grew up with the idea of fasting. It was sort of something we just did.
Well, Ramadan too, right?
Ramadan, right? And in Islam, yeah. So I'm not Muslim, but I grew up with my friends doing that. So we would do it. And yes, we would all lose weight. And I remember being a kid and my mom was always worried that we would all become so thin, because you do lose fat. You can also lose muscle. And so I realized as a naturopathic doctor, and when we got training in fasting, that there's so many different kinds of fasting. And when I looked at the research for fertility, I realized that we really don't know a lot. A lot of the research has been done on mice, and it's also just studying starvation and calorie restriction. So I'm actually one of the few people that I get to test this on my patients, and I have been doing a lot of fasting with my couples to help them optimize their hormones, but I do it very differently for the men versus the women. And then I'll get to talk about maybe how I do it during their cycle, if they're not cycling, when should they fast, all of that. So personally, myself, so I just want to back up and say there's different fasts. And a lot of people are confused about all the terminology. If you Google in 2018, the number one diet, it wasn't paleo, it wasn't keto, it was intermittent fasting. So I'm so glad we're talking about this. But intermittent fasting means 1 to 2 to 3 days of the week you don't eat. And then there's time restricted fasting. So that is when you restrict your eating to 6 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours. So a lot of people might skip breakfast. They might eat one meal a day. And then there's prolonged fasting. So that's like 4 consecutive days, 72 hours of just water, of not fasting, which is very difficult to do. And they all have their pros and cons, but usually I start my patients with the time restricted. I say, minimum, if you're not going 12 hours between dinner and breakfast or 2 meals, let's start there. Let's prolong that to 14. Let's prolong that to 16 to 18. And that's the end goal. And that's what I do. So Fridays are my day where I do my intermittent fasting, because I see patients back to back. And I always say you want to eat when you're relaxed, not in work mode, not in that sympathetic dominant state. So it's better to skip a meal if your blood sugar is balanced and your adrenals are functioning okay and you can actually handle it. It's better not to eat when you're in that work go mode, because you're not going to be digesting it and it's going to turn into belly fat often. So that's how I do my intermittent fast. And then there's a 1 month of the year where, yes, we just eat with the sunrise and sunset. So it's kind of like Ramadan. I will go through the months depending on my cycle, so before ovulation and before you get your period, this is the thing with women I want to really emphasize. And I'm sure you've talked about this a lot, but for production of progesterone and for the production of all these hormones that go up and down for us as women throughout the month, we need complex carbs. And so often I found a lot of women are just doing these diets and fasting, but then it's really throwing off their hormones. And some of them won't sleep as well. They lose the weight, but their sleep quality isn't as good, or their cycles become irregular, or they've become infertile. They can't get pregnant. So that's when I started to tweak the intermittent fast for the women in my trimester 0. I don't get anyone to do fast right as if when they're trying, but I prefer if the 3 months before they start trying to really optimize their eggs, especially for the women, because we do have mice studies showing that when mice intermittently fasted every other day and had calories restricted, they actually prolonged their egg quality. And so they were able to have offspring later on in life. And nowadays I find a lot of 40-year-olds coming to my practice wanting to have their first child, 38-year-olds not having a partner yet and they want to have a child, 35-year-olds infertile, having miscarriages, having issues, PCOS. And so getting them on this fasting trend and understanding that in order to help you and your offspring, it's not so much about what you eat. We focus so much on what to eat, but no one has really talked about how often you eat. How often you eat is, I always say, more important than what you're eating. So I love that. I make it simple for them, because everyone wants to know, what should I eat? And of course for fertility, there are things we should be eating more of, but focus on how much you're eating, how often you're eating. I mean, look at our ancestors. They would go hunt, they would eat, and then there was no fridge. There was no 24-hour, drive-through. Whereas now we just have access to food. And unfortunately, this myth that came out that you have to snack 5 meals and 6 meals a day kind of ruined it for all. And I still have patients who are like, I thought I was doing the right thing by eating like every 2 hours. And it's like, no, if you do have hypoglycemia, if you do get hangry, these are all signs that something's wrong. So I always tell my patients, I know how healthy you are by how long you can fast. If I fast you for a day and you are a total mess and you start shaking, you are angry, you're irritable, you're just like getting a headache, you have all these symptoms, those are not healthy individuals. So we want to get to a place, and that used to be me, which is why I got into this, was I had to eat every 2 hours. I could not skip a meal. I always had a bag of nuts and a bar in my bag wherever I went. And I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought that was health. I thought like eating often, was healthy for me. And I didn't realize up until way later that, wait a second, how is it that person can go 72 hours without anything and they feel more vital, they have more energy, their brain function improves. And so I realized having hypoglycemia is a condition. There's something wrong. Your blood sugar shouldn't drop when you skip a meal. Your adrenals should assist and release cortisol, but not to the point where now you're releasing too much adrenaline or cortisol, and that's making you more anxious. So I often will test my patients to know how healthy you are, how healthy they are by knowing how well they fast.
Hey guys, if you want to try one of these necklaces, if you want to try any of these EMF tools, go to essentialenergy.us and use coupon code ChantelRay for a huge discount. That's essentialenergy.us. So you guys know I've interviewed women all across the country that have been naturally thin their whole life with no dieting, no gimmicks. I interviewed over 1,000 women. I asked them, what'd you eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner? And they told me everything. And so I actually have written 4 books now with all of these insights. I have put their secrets all right there. And so if you're tired of just the diet roller coaster and you just cannot lose that weight, I have a book called Waist Away. That's the very first one. That's how I break down how I discovered intermittent fasting, how it changed my body, and how thin eaters, they don't even call it intermittent fasting. They just do it. Fasting to Freedom is another book I wrote. It goes deeper. It's more into the spiritual and emotional side of fasting. It brings clarity and confidence, and it really kind of teaches you how to do a little bit longer fasting. Then I have One Meal and a Tasting. It's my most practical guide. It just walks you step by step through how you can live a sustainable fasting lifestyle and literally the exact things that these women did while enjoying the foods you love. And then finally, a Bible study that's called Freedom from Food. And this is like a 6-week study that you can do with a group of friends. It's really fun to do with a group. These books are the complete bundle. So if you go to chantelrayway.com, we're actually doing one free giveaway for the complete bundle. So if you go to our Facebook group, it's the Intermittent Fasting and OMAD group. Make sure you join. We're going to do a free contest for a free bundle for one lucky person. But if you want it right away, just grab the free bundle. It's the cheapest it's ever been because we want you to get your breakthrough, your body, your rules, your breakthrough. chantelrayway.com. So question number 2.
So what is going on day 1 through 15 that makes it harder for you to fast during that time?
I think everyone is different. So most of us have a 28-day cycle, but a lot of women will have PCOS, right? So they're having 32, 35 to 60-day cycles. So for those two individuals, very different. So I really like to test their hormones. But what happens when you get your period, all your hormones are low. And often we feel a bit tired, right? All the blood is like in the uterus and now it's coming out. So sometimes that's the time where even traditionally you look at Chinese medicine, you look at Ayurvedic medicine, even Persian medicine. When you look at those, this is not the time to fast. During that time, your body is like getting rid of stuff. So that's when you want to replenish. I always say like you want to eat food that builds blood. You want to have bone broth. You want to have things that actually are giving back now. And you don't want to over-exercise on that day 1, day 2 when you're losing a lot of blood. After that, now hormones, LH, FSH, estradiol, all these have to go up. But with day 14, we assume everyone ovulates at that time. That's not the case. Not everyone's smack in the middle. I ovulate later, so I didn't know that. And so someone else might ovulate day 10. But just before ovulation, there's a peak in progesterone that goes up in that LH. And you need carbohydrates. You need food to make that hormone. It comes from pregnenolone, which comes from cholesterol. So that hormone actually is converted from cholesterol in the mitochondria. So it's good to sometimes do a fast. I love doing a fast myself from day 6 till day 10. So I can do those 4 days really well. And then I can't go to day 30 because I'm a 28 day. But then right after ovulation, like day 18 to day 22, 23, I can do. But most of my women are progesterone deficient or estrogen dominant. This is so rampant. These are the women who are listening who have sore breasts before their period. They get moody before their cycles. They have PMS. They can't sleep as well. They're more anxious before their cycle. They get irritable and their temper is off. That's often their husbands will even tell me if it's very extreme, like they're just different people before their period versus after. So those women, they might not feel so great fasting during that time unless the hormones are fixed first. So you must have really healthy hormones if that is the time for you to feel really good fasting, whereas a lot of women won't. They're already PMSing. They're already estrogen dominant when they should be more progesterone dominant during that phase. So they might not feel great, or they might be doing it at the wrong time. They might be actually doing it during ovulation every month. And that doesn't help either.
You said day 6 through 10. What's going on through day 6 through 10?
This is when your hormones are we don't have issues with estrogen if we're still cycling. If it's a menopausal women or perimenopausal women and their hormones all over the place, they're getting their cycle like every 20 days and then 60 days and then 2 weeks. They're so all over the place that I don't necessarily pick for them when to do it. I just want to make sure when they're menstruating, I don't fast them. If they're still ovulating and we can check hormones, do not fast a day or two before ovulation because you need food to make those hormones. Otherwise, you're going to not ovulate because you forced it not to happen. It's kind of like starving, right? And then when you're not getting enough of that food, you don't sleep as well. You don't make that progesterone or that LH from the carbs. And then also just before your period. So if you're every 28 days, 29 days, day 27, 26 fasting, most people don't feel well either because all that hormone, now all that uterine lining has to shed. So you want the body's focus to go on where it needs to go. And when its hormone changes are happening, that's when we usually say as doctors, don't mess with that. Let nature do its thing. But when it's consistently happening, so day 6 to day 10, usually the hormones are pretty steady. The estrogen's rising. There's not much happening with progesterone. And the body, I find it's like inhaling. We just naturally inhale. Often we have issues exhaling and letting go. So with hormones, I look at it the same way. When is it naturally doing its thing? And when is it boosting and spiking? And that's during ovulation. There's a huge shift in hormones during that time. There's also a huge shift in hormones right before we get our period. So that's the time where you don't want to mess with nature. That is not a time naturally women will ever fast. And I looked at, old historic books, like why would women historically not do certain things during their period? Why would they not do it during ovulation or when they were thinking of having a child? And you see this, that this is not the time to mess with those changes in hormones.
And question number 3.
Let's talk about estrogen dominance for just a second. Yeah. What are your tips to help with that? Do you suggest people taking progesterone cream, and what days would they take it if they were going to?
Yeah. So estrogen dominance is a word. I always find it funny because one of my teachers always said, of course we're estrogen dominant. We're female. Like there's no such thing. So in conventional medicine, a lot of OBGYN friends that I have will actually say there's no such thing as estrogen dominance. We are supposed to be estrogen dominant. But just to clarify, so we have 2 weeks at the beginning of our cycle, 2 weeks at the end of our cycle. The first 2 weeks, we are all estrogen dominant. That's the preliminary hormone that's supposed to be high. After ovulation, we are still having a little bit of estrogen, but we should have more progesterone in comparison to estrogen. So what we're talking about with this estrogen dominance, or I call it relative estrogen dominance, is around that day 19, day 20, 21, 23, 24, that week. That time of our cycle, we should have a higher ratio of progesterone to estrogen, and you can test it through blood. You can do the Dutch test. It's a dried urine test that I use. That's the time you want to test it. I say that's the time when most people say, I don't feel well. I'm more moody, breast tenderness, and all of that, right? So that's that estrogen stimulating the breast tissue. That's what's dominant. So what you want to do is first figure out, are you progesterone deficient or do you have too much estrogen? Because they're two different things. And I find often it's a lot easier to go, well, I want to balance it, so I'll just take progesterone. And I'll say, but you got enough progesterone. Your eggs are good quality. They're releasing enough progesterone. And we're not really fixing the problem if I just add more progesterone. So to answer your question, no, I often will try and figure out which one is it. Are they not pooping out their estrogen? Because that's when it excretes through our stool. Are you getting it too much from the environment, the xenoestrogens? Is it in your makeup? Is it in the phthalates? Is it in the plastics? Is it in the plastic water bottle you're drinking every day? So we try to remove all the xenoestrogens and then add things in their diet like broccoli seed extract, DIM, calcium D-glucarate, indole-3-carbinol. These are all things you can get in supplement forms, which you just can't eat enough cruciferous vegetables. You'd be very gassy if you got the amount that's in these capsules. So I use some products that help bind that excess estrogen and get it out, but you take it usually from ovulation or day after ovulation until your cycle begins. So it's really most often just needed in that 2 weeks, the luteal phase, that second half. Sometimes a little bit of progesterone from wild yams is also helpful, especially if I see that they don't have enough progesterone and the estrogen is way too dominant and it's going to take too long and they have, a lot of mood disturbances during that time that it's going to take a lot of time. I might do both together. So you can bind that extra estrogen, get it out, and then also boost progesterone. But as we age, your progesterone has to go down. It's for progestation. It's for having babies. And our egg quality goes down as we age. So I'm not shocked if someone's low progesterone at 42, 45, and they're still estrogen dominant. But their conventional doctor might say, that's youthfulness. You have a lot of estrogen. That's a good thing. And I often have to inform them that, no, it's not a good thing. It's at the wrong time of the month. You know, estrogen dominance can increase your risk of breast cancer and estrogen positive cancers. So I just did a post on my Instagram where I said, it's not always about how much estrogen you have. It's about what kind you have.
And the balance to progesterone.
And the balance, exactly. So it's all these ratios, and then what kind of estrogen are you making? The really healthy kind that protects against cancer, or are you making the unhealthy kind? So cruciferous vegetables, fiber, one of my favorite things to not complicate this whole seed cycling is just to take 2 tablespoons of ground flax seeds, organic ground flax seeds every day, add it to a smoothie. That's a great fiber. It's a phytoestrogen. Soy is another tricky one. We have 50-50 in research. You know, a lot of people are sensitive to soy, to get non-GMO organic, but soy isoflavones have also been shown in research to be protective and another good phytoestrogen. So those are easy things you can do, is just have more broccoli, you know, have a cruciferous vegetable every day that's cooked or steamed, not raw.